Server 17 once again. This is my Ninja Gaiden 3 Ultimate Ninja Difficulty video walkthrough. This is day 6, this is part 2 of it. And we're going to be moving through this lovely looking... I have no idea what this room is. Vestibule? Cathedral? Pillar of Serpent? Crazy room? And as you can see, there's a bunch of the standard dudes, the crazy experimental lab, wannabe Wolverines, candy floss, pink dude, bird-like, serpent-like, whatever you want to call them. I have no idea what the name is. What I do know is if you wind path towards them, and then you, wind run off their heads into Flying Swallow, you can immediately kill them, and then from that you can follow up with an obliteration technique, and you can get the additional Nimpo that you're going to be needing to save up for that all-important Nimpo, for lack of a better word. This room here is quite tough because there's a couple of the mages and there's a lot of dudes. Mages are your biggest threat. You want to keep them off camera as much as possible to try and pacify them. The dudes with the crazy batons from a rave / landing strip so that they can navigate with the, is it the air traffic control tower? He's going to block everything on Ultimate Ninja. He's an absolute asshole. There are a couple of tricks that you can use to kill him, and I've probably mentioned them already, so I don't really have to reiterate here. One of the best ways to do it is the double Flying Swallow with the claws, a fantastic method. I'm a big fan of it. Another method is to try and stun him with a shuriken. Single shuriken stun into a launcher to try and get him up and do something with it from there. It's been quite a long time since I played this game, so a lot of my Ninja Gaiden skills are atrophying at this point. Not that this game takes all that much skill. This is more of a case of patience, this one. Because they took a lot of the skill away from the series and they kind of neutered it and turned it into something that I'm not the biggest fan of. They re-released it and put a lot of things back in, and everybody was like, oh, this is the saviour of the Ninja Gaiden series, and it really wasn't. It was just this game with less bullshit, which still amounted to a hell of a lot more bullshit than the previous ones. And if anybody ever asks me, yo dude, should I play a Ninja Gaiden? I will always say yes, but I would never recommend this one. Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2, that's about as far as you have to go. You can get any of the various iterations of it, they both have plenty. They're all good. This one's not. But I was thinking of things that baffle me earlier, just like I'm baffled by this game, how it could have gone so great to something so bad, like swapping weapons, which takes longer than some games do to load. And you might be wondering if it's installed, and it is installed, and it doesn't make a difference. Like, the game is incredibly poorly optimized, and I assume it's probably very similar on PlayStation 3, even though a lot of people like to tell me that everything loads faster on PlayStation 3, even though in my experience in playing that console, because I own one, I've never noticed a difference in any of the games that I've played on both. But, people like to big up the console they have, the truest notion of fanboyism. But things that don't make sense. Ninja Gaiden 3 being a paramount example of this. There's... look, this is a mid-level load. What the fuck is this? I would normally remove these kind of things, but I've left them in just so that I can give you an impression of what you've got to put up with when you play this game. But Team Ninja are making a game called, is it in Yaba or something daft? It's this zombie ninja action game thing, which I have no idea if it's going to be any good. The cards at this moment in time say it's probably not going to be that great, but I'm optimistic and I'm covering it. And even if that's covering it in, just a barrage of insults on a balls deep, I'm still going to pop a video out for it. I'm hoping it's a great game. But moving away from games, things that baffle me are customary things that happen in different countries that I don't know too much about. And the other day I was thinking about Saudi Arabia, as I often do in, quiet contemplation. Good old Saudi, just chilling out there across the oceans. And I was trying to think of a redeeming factor about Saudi Arabia in my ignorance. And I always come up with the same things when I think of any kind of place. What do I know about Saudi Arabia? Absolutely nothing. Sandy, maybe? There's that episode of American Dad where you're not allowed to sing and everybody wears robes because it's cooler. So my entire knowledge of that place, of a country, an entire country, as shocking as that is, aside from its geographical point on a map, comes from, popular culture, media, which is never really a good interpretation of those kind of places. And all the other interesting factoids and information that I know about Saudi Arabia come from pointing out problems with religion, which, I don't know, is not really a good thing, I don't think. Like, a lot of countries, I mean, my geography is not great, guys. I wanted to talk about this because it's going to go into a tangent that I've been thinking about, which is religion. I just set it up with a different premise. But my religion's not great. It's decent for, I suppose, my country's standard, because every country has a different, grasp of geographical places. America gets vilified because they always get the dumbest bastard on the news when they're going on about census and, statistically in America, only 7% of them know where America is. And it's like, well, were the 93% of people that you asked all, like, geography illiterate, or was it just a bad day down at the fucking bus station that you asked those questions at? I don't think any of those tests, unless they're set up in a very specific and random way, are any more valid than any other kind of statistic. But leading it back to my original thought, when I was thinking of Saudi Arabia, it was coming from the perspective of mocking religion. And I try to stay away from religion on this channel as best as I can. It comes up every so often. And I don't avoid it because I don't enjoy it or I don't find it interesting, because it's complete to the contrary. I do enjoy it. It's just a lot of people think that religion is sacrosanct, which is just a fancy way of saying sacred, or of such a high esteem and so untouchable that it can't be challenged, or it can't be judged, or it can't be assessed or evaluated. And I think that is just ignorance in its finest. Conditional or unconditional, it's just bullshit, really. But the reason I've stayed away from it for the most is A, because a lot of people don't know the difference between religion and faith, or my definition of the two, and not many religious people that I know can take much of a joke when it comes to anything that is remotely against their beliefs. So it can divide a room, it can split a crowd. It's a very polarizing topic. And I'm also categorizing atheists in this list as well. This is not just people who believe in a god or a deity or something like that. This is the people who believe in the absence of anything as well. Because when you talk to an atheist or whatever, somebody who's without a lot of these religions in their life, will probably tell you, well, what I should say, sorry, is if you question why there isn't a god, they'll probably get defensive and, do the same kind of spiel that you would if you were to challenge a religious person on why there is no god, or why there is a god, or something along those lines. Every single side of this, the only people you don't really get anything like that from are people who just kind of don't care. And you're getting a lot of that mainly because of the way that society is changing. But I'm on a tangent here that's not a very interesting one, so I'm going to bring it back to Saudi Arabia. So the first thing I want to say here, guys, is if you are religious, or whatever you want to say, if you belong to a group of faiths and rules and Sabbaths and all those kind of grody stuff, I implore you not to get offended. I implore you to try and look at this objectively, because all I'm pointing out here are gaps in logic. I'm not trying to kill anybody's god or to change anybody's beliefs. I'm just going to shoot the shit on some crazy inconsistencies that Saudi Arabia reminds me of. And that's the same with people who don't believe in God and don't like religion or don't like faith. I will implore you not to get, super, it's bullshit because of this. I want to try to keep this as jovial and silly yet contemplative as I can, because I don't want to, I don't want to kick the hornet's nest, for lack of a better term. This sequence right now, when it finishes loading, you're going to take on a gauntlet of these, I think they're called Reapers, and you're going to notice that I go to the 360Y on landing technique because it's the safest way to kill them, and aside from that, I wasn't very good at this point at dodging them. Which you can dodge them, you can wait for them to swing, you can iframe through it, and then you can punish them with a quick 2-3. This is actually a very slow technique because they block the majority of the hits. But if you've got patience and you've got the dexterity to keep doing this, you should be okay. Because it's very safe. But on point. So the little inconsistency that I spotted was principally in Saudi Arabia, being a very predominantly religious country, you can be executed by beheading for committing the sin, get that, sinning, the sin of idolatry, which, if you're not too sure what that means, because it's not really a word you come across too much, that is the worship of an other god. And I find that absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm not too sure how often it happens, that's why I said principally, but just the whole notion that you can be killed for believing in something that a percentage of people don't even think is real. But to take that one step further then is, that's not just believing in another god, that's cheating on one god with another one. Which I just think is delicious for so many reasons. But people have died for it. Many people. And it's 2013 and this is still a thing. And you notice I mentioned Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is not exactly like certain parts of the world. There will be areas of this country, this is me in complete ignorance right now, that are quite sophisticated and quite modern and up to spec. But there will also be other areas that are predominantly ruled by very archaic ways of thinking, where this is a thing. Like, this is a thing that happens to people. And it's, like, you might be wondering what are my beliefs? Well, my beliefs are selfish. And they're selfish because, you know, the only thing I truly know is myself. You know, and my circle of experience. So I'm not an atheist. You know, I'm not believing in the death of God, the death of religion. I'm not an agnostic. You know, I'm not in the undecided factor. I'm not a deist. I'm not a theist. I guess I am an anti-theist in some ways, because I'm against a lot of religions, but, you know, I believe in myself. Because that's the only thing that I really have any kind of control over. I am here for a small amount of time. I don't think I should waste that time in believing in something I cannot prove. So instead, I'm going to try and spend that time doing what I enjoy, doing what I love and what I'm passionate about, and you know, seeking a decent life that way. To put it, you know, in the most passive way that I can. But the notion of idolatry is great to me because it's quite... This is probably nothing to somebody who is of fervent belief like my grandma, who I bring up quite a lot. She's a great example. I'm going to have to record her sometime just so you can hear the way she lives her life, which is amazing to me. But this is probably not too affecting to anybody of, you know, a religious persuasion, because a lot of interpretations of religion these days are generally quite just insane. You know, the really aggressive belief systems of, if you don't believe in our God, the one God, our good God, the one with the best heart, then you're a heathen or an infidel or whatever kind of lingo you want to use to say that, you know, you're not part of the good club, you're in the bad club. And thus some of these people believe that you should be killed or you should die or you should feel God's wrath or whatever you want to say, which is crazy, I think. So to those people, it's probably not a big thing that, you know, well, obviously, if you don't believe in the Almighty God and you believe in some fake God, you're detracting from this great faith and you should be punished for it. So it's probably just like, yeah, it's just another Sunday. Which is ironic you should say that, because the original day of Sabbath was a Friday, because the Sunday was a pagan day, and then they changed it like they change everything. But for believing in something else, which the fundamental flaw that I have with this train of thought is that almost all these religions are monotheistic, which means it has one god, one ruling god. Some of them get quite dramatic and different and interesting with that ruling god, and they have things like the Trinity, which is a concept that is delicious and retarded in my opinion, because it doesn't really make any sense. It just seems to me like the creation of an egotistical, extremely jealous, narcissist to have an embodiment of himself outside of himself, which makes it even crazier that he conceived himself. But never mind, we're not going down that path. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this on a more jovial side. But one of the main tenets and beliefs of all monotheistic religions, this room, by the way, guys, this room is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. All I'm doing here is throwing a shuriken and then flying swallow into obliteration techniques, and this took me maybe 10 to 15 goes because the room and the grenades and the slowdown and the douchiness, it's not cool. It's just not cool. But as I was saying, that one of the base tenets of monotheistic religions is in the name, monotheism. Mono, one. Not even stereo with these religions. One God is the true God, and all other gods are either fake, don't exist, or unimportant. So, from that very base tenet, there's only one God anyway. So why is it such a slight to believe in something that doesn't exist? Something that your teachings teach you isn't real. Like, that logic to me is the same as them believing in Father Christmas. But I don't think, people get shit on as much at Christmas, which is a terrible example because, there's only certain denominations of religion that believe in Christmas. I happen to believe in Christmas and don't carry any religion. I just really like getting gifts. So to me, the concept of idolatry is a logical absurdity, because all it is, essentially, is the religious equivalent of somebody really liking a CD. I have CDs on my walls. That doesn't mean I pray to them and they're in effigy of my beliefs in them. It just means that they're fucking awesome and they're up there on a shelf so I can get them when I need them. But it just seems strange that, if you do believe in the teachings of whichever religion, you'll notice I'm not specifically mentioning them by name. There's a reason for this, folks. I'm predominantly aware of Christianity because that's the one that I've had the most exposure to. But if I was born in another country, it might be Judaism, it might be other ones. So I'm not going to name them because there's no point. I'm just going to use them all, in a sense together, lump them all together because they're all very similar and they all share various traits. But idolatry, it's such a fucking good word. Idolatry. Awesome word. The worship. It's essentially adultery with an idol. That's all it is. And it's a cool word. But it's a word that's, can get you killed. And how does that make any sense? When there's only one God anyway, so why would they care so much? That doesn't make any sense to me, that one, guys. But I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different tangent. There's going to be another one in the next video, because I didn't even get to the point I wanted to make. But thank you for watching anyhow, guys, and you take care now.